Sorry it took me so long to get back. I was searching everywhere for what I told you I would find you. Fortunately, I couldn't. But don't worry. I found a replacement. I think this should do the job quite well, don't you? Stay with me. Don't even start that. We've still got a long night ahead of us. So what shall we start with? Nah, let's save the best for last. There we go. It is good proof. Entertaining. I need to find an extension cord. So, how shall we start? You're gonna have to pardon me 1 second. I will be right back. Fear Crawler, what's up, man? How have you been?
Hope I'm not interrupting anything.
Mini Crawler and I were just making some cookies here, and turns out you gotta put salt in these things.
I mean, who knew?
So yeah, is there any possibility I could borrow some?
As a matter of fact, I do have some. I can run it right over.
Okay, perfect. Hey listen, while I got you on the horn here,
I've got this great story I want to tell you.
Actually, I have one for you too, but please, go ahead. I'm all ears.
Okay, well, here's my story. Listen to this one. Have you ever loved someone so much that there isn't anything in the world that you wouldn't do for them? That always sounded so cliché to me. Just a nice sentiment that people say to one another but never really mean. Anyone that's ever been in a relationship certainly wants to feel that way for the other person. But how often is that ever really sincere? I'd say it's extremely rare. Just ask anyone who's ever been dumped by their significant other. Love is fleeting. It has conditions. It's like a two-way street littered with hazard signs on both sides, no end in sight to the roadwork. I loved my wife. That's the past tense, I know. You see, she passed away 4 years ago. An undiagnosed illness robbed me of her. Robbed us both of her. Our son was less than a year old at the time. One moment she's tickling his stomach as he's cradled in her arms on the couch. The next she's on the floor, completely unresponsive, her body cushioning his fall as she collapsed. Losing her, I felt like half a person. It took that tragedy for me to realize that I didn't do enough with the time we had. I didn't love strongly enough. I did nothing to prove my devotion to her, and now I'd never get the chance. For the first year after her passing, I was like a ghost. I felt completely disconnected. Even as I held our son, I felt like only half of my heart could love. The other half was in a deep slumber. I mourned her loss with every waking moment. Her death was consuming me and I was allowing it to. I needed to wake up. It was a Saturday morning. Our son was turning 5. We had just moved house a few weeks earlier and we were still getting used to the neighborhood. The move was meant to be a fresh start for both of us. New scenery, new people, a new life together. The house wasn't perfect. The front screen door was loose and would constantly bang in a strong breeze, and I had already been locked inside my bedroom on 2 occasions due to the lock sticking. But still, it was home. My son was in the living room. There was some cartoon playing on the TV screen, but he wasn't paying attention. I had just finished making us some pancakes for breakfast, and thought it might be nice for us to eat together on the couch. When I walked in with the food, he was facing away from me, and fidgeting with something in his hands. I thought maybe he was playing with one of his action figures, so I set the plates down on the coffee table and asked if he wanted me to play with him. When he turned in my direction, I saw what he was holding. It was a photo of the three of us, my wife, him, and myself, taken when he was just 6 months old. It was the first time I had ever seen him do this, and it was the first time I saw in his eyes the exact same thing everyone else had seen in my own after his mother had died. I wrapped my arms around him tightly and let the grief of the past 4 years wash away in a stream of tears. In that moment, things began to click back into place inside my head. I knew that I would do anything for him. I felt repurposed. I felt reborn. I felt complete again, and I smiled. This revelation was reanimating. I ran upstairs to grab his birthday present and hurried back down to the living room. I tossed it into his lap and watched him marvel at the shiny wrapping and bright yellow bow. He wasted no time as he excitedly unwrapped the box and pulled the plush teddy bear from its cardboard prison. Instantly, he loved it. He loved me, and I loved him. After breakfast, I went into the kitchen to wash the dishes. This was usually a chore we shared, but I decided to give him a break since it was his birthday. I had barely gotten my hands into the hot sink when I heard footsteps on the hallway stairs, followed by the sound of the front door violently slamming. Thinking it was just the wind catching the screen door, I continued with the dishes. It was perhaps 5 minutes later that I had finished up and walked into the living room to check on my son. And as my eyes surveyed the completely unoccupied room, I could feel my heart sink into my stomach. I ran outside calling my son's name over and over again, my voice echoing ominously through the cul-de-sac. I was completely gripped by the overwhelming panic now filling my body as it became clear that my son was missing. I phoned the police. They issued an Amber Alert, and I was told to wait. But that was not going to happen. With each passing minute, I found a new way to blame myself. How could I have let this happen? Why didn't I check the door? Why did I allow myself to assume anything? I found myself pacing the cul-de-sac for hours, desperate for any sign of my son. It was getting dark. I went back to the house and grabbed a flashlight from the garage. I had combed the streets so many times at this point that I could practically count the bricks on the foundation of every house in the area. This was when I decided to focus my attention to the dense woods behind our house. I made the trek into the woods, my shoes leaving a heavy trail in the mud as I wandered in random directions, looking for my little boy. I don't know how much time passed, but I had been out there long enough for the mud on my sneakers to harden into clay, and for my flashlight to grow dim as the battery drained. I was lost. I stared up at the autumn sky as if I were begging the universe to piece together an unsolvable puzzle, to point me in the right direction. I didn't have to wait long. The scent of burning cedars and the distinct glow of a campfire had shifted my focus. I made my way toward the crackling fire, which was dead center in a small clearing within the maze of rotting trees. My eyes absorbed the illuminated image of an overweight bearded man, wearing overalls, sitting on a decaying log in front of the fire. He was barefoot, his feet and legs covered in mud and filth. He was like a statue sitting there, his unflinching gaze fixated on the flames. "Excuse me," I asked. "I'm a bit lost. Can you help me?" He remained silent. If it weren't for his extremely labored breathing, I could have easily mistaken him for a statue. I called to him again. "Excuse me, do you have a phone?" Again, no response, but his eyes did shift up slightly in my direction. This seemed to be going nowhere. I knew he wasn't going to help me. I just didn't know why he wasn't making the effort. I wanted to walk away, but something at his feet had just earned my undivided attention. It was muddy, but familiar. A teddy bear. I felt my skin crawl, and a knot twist deep inside the pit of my stomach as I noticed the dried blood on his hands. "Where did you get that teddy bear?" I demanded. He didn't reply. He simply lowered his head and began to shake it violently left and right. "Where is my son?" I shouted. This question made him stand erect, his enormous size seeming to double as he stood upright and dug his fingers into his chubby face. He continued to erratically shake his head from side to side, all the while making the most inhuman screeches I've ever heard. "Where is my son?" I demanded again, my hands now clenched into fists. My adrenaline was pumping now. I could hear the tinnitus ring in my ears as my vision began to tunnel. I looked at the burning logs, and that was when I noticed the bones. I snapped. Something dark entered my mind. I was no longer in control. I shoved my hand inside the fire and pulled out the first burning log that my palm came into contact with. I swung it like a baseball bat, connecting with the side of his head. The impact was so hard and so strong that the log broke in half. He collapsed, the muddy ground doing very little to break his fall. I could see the contents of his skull spill out onto the dead leaves that littered the forest floor. Was I vindicated? Was my son? I wasn't really sure. I managed to find my way back home. I went through the back door and left my muddy shoes outside on the back steps. I climbed the stairs to the upstairs bathroom and took a shower. I cried the entire time. As I said, I loved my son. In my own logic, I had just proved that I would do anything in the world for him. As I sat there and bandaged up my burnt hands, I reflected on the tragic events of the day. Once again, I felt the emptiness of loss consuming me. I grabbed the cordless phone and began dialing the police. I still didn't know how I was going to explain what had happened, but I was positive that there was enough evidence inside those woods to piece everything together. As I dialed, I made my way to the bedroom to get some clean clothing. The door was locked again. Like I said, we had been having problems with it. Imagine my shock when my son opened the door, his new teddy bear cradled lovingly in his arms. You see, that morning as I was washing the dishes, he had gone upstairs and taken a nap in my bed. The door got stuck again, and after he woke up, he waited patiently for me to come upstairs and let him out. As for the front door, it was windy again that morning, and the screen door had simply slammed in the breeze, as it had done countless times before. The local news report the next morning filled in the rest of the gaps, talking at length about the murder that had taken place inside those woods. The senseless killing of a mute male that was also mentally disabled. The one that took a teddy bear everywhere he went. As for the blood on his clothes and the bones in the fire, I learned that he would burn the diseased animal carcasses from his family's farm so that the other animals wouldn't become infected, a chore he undertook to help his father. I forgot to bring my muddy shoes in from the back door step. I went to get them a little while ago and they were gone. Someone left me a note on a piece of crumpled up paper covered in muddy fingerprints. It was only 4 words, but it was very specific. It read, "I followed your footprints." I know his father loved him. I know there is nothing in the world that he wouldn't have done for his son. Maybe that even includes murder. If so, I guess that what he's about to do will just about make us even.
Wow, you and those twists at the end of your stories, man.
Have you been watching M. Night Shyamalan again?
Why no, absolutely not. I mean, I don't even know who that is.
You were gonna tell me a story as well. Go ahead.
Two Korean girls named Soo Min and Hee Yoon were out mountain climbing one day. It was a sport that they both enjoyed, and over the years, they had become quite experienced climbers. On this particular day, when they started up the mountain, the weather was good. However, as they neared the top, the weather unexpectedly changed and the wind became fierce. Suddenly, Hee Yoon lost her footing and slid 20 feet down the rocky surface of the mountain. She managed to grab hold of a snow-covered tree and stopped herself from going over the edge. Feeling a sharp pain, she realized that she had broken her leg in the fall. It was too painful for her to climb back down the mountain, so the two girls managed to slowly make their way east until they came to a small cabin on the other side. Inside the cabin, they found a fireplace with a pile of chopped wood beside it, a toilet, and a cupboard stocked with tins of beans and cans of tuna. "I'll go back down to base camp and fetch help," said Soo Min. "You better stay here. Will you be okay on your own?" "I'll be fine," said Hee Yoon, wincing as she tended to her injured leg. "Just hurry back." "I will. You can count on me," said Soo Min. And with that, she left her friend in the cabin and began the perilous climb back down to the foot of the mountain. By the time she reached the mountain rescue station, it was too dark for the rangers to send a team to fetch her companion. They told her that they would have to wait until dawn, so the exhausted girl spent a sleepless night worrying about her friend. Several hours later, Soo Min arrived back at the mountain cabin with the rescue workers. They had requested a helicopter to transport Hee Yoon to the nearest hospital for treatment. "Hee Yoon, I'm back," yelled Soo Min. But when she opened the door to the cabin, her friend wasn't inside. Soo Min was puzzled, but then she saw the toilet door was closed. She knocked on the door. "Hee Yoon, come on, help has arrived." There was no answer. She tried the door, but it was locked. She kept knocking, but there was no reply from Hee Yoon. With the help of the rangers, she managed to break the lock on the toilet door. But when the door swung open, she was confronted by a horrible sight. Hee Yoon was sitting on the floor of the toilet. Her skin was deathly pale and her hair had turned white. Her eyes were wide open, frozen in terror, and her arms were raised in front of her as if trying to protect herself. It was obvious that she was dead. The poor girl's cause of death remains unknown. Someone or something terrified her so much that she died of fright. What could have gone on during the night while the unfortunate girl was trapped in that isolated cabin to cause such a terrible and fatal reaction? To this day, nobody has an answer. It's a mystery best left in the mountains. It's nice to get caught up with old friends, but there is work to do.
Well, now that we got our salt, you want to make some smoothies while we wait for the cookies to bake? Where the heck's my extension cord? Did Dismal take my extension cord? Let me call him. Hey Dismal, listen, did you by any chance take my extension cord? Well, I guess he's making smoothies too. Huh.